August 27, 1946. Philippine Sea. Auto 6:20 hours. The sun had just broken the horizon, its first light glinting across the steel-blue waves as the carrier USS Langley, CVL-27, cut through the morning haze. Humid air rolled across the deck, thick, warm, and heavy with the smell of fuel, salt spray, and hot oil. Yet above the calm sea, the mood was anything but peaceful. A tension lingered, one born from whispered rumors of fast-moving intruders approaching from the west. On the forward flight deck, a line of F8F Bearcats waited like coiled predators. Sleek, compact, brutally powerful. Their massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engines gave them the appearance of fighters straining to break free even before the throttle was touched. The morning heat shimmered around their cowling as mechanics secured panels and checked fuel lines. In the cockpit of Bearcat, Blue 109, Lieutenant Daniel Hawk Mercer, 23 years old, leaned back in his seat and breathed slow, steady breaths. Born in Bakersfield, California, raised among endless farmlands and open sky, he had flown everything the Navy put in front of him: Wildcats, Hellcats, Corsairs. But none felt like this. None leaped like this. The Bearcat wasn't a fighter, it was a vertical weapon, an arrow engineered to go straight up and kill whatever dared climb after it. He glanced down at a photograph taped beside the altimeter. His younger sister, Claire, age 15. She hated that he'd stayed in the Navy after the war ended. She wrote letters begging him to come home. "No more war, Danny. You survived it once. Don't push your luck." He wished he could promise her he'd be safe. But the world wasn't safe, not yet. An urgent crackle burst across the carrier speakers. "Air Division, stand by for Scramble. Fast targets inbound, speed estimated 380 knots. Unknown nationality." A murmur rippled through the deck crews. Post-war Japan was disarmed, defeated, broken. But rogue groups, escapees, pilots refusing surrender? Everyone had heard the stories. Zero remnants hiding on forgotten islands, kamikaze diehards refusing to accept the Emperor's capitulation. A few had already attacked reconnaissance aircraft near Formosa. The unknown bogies were coming in, low and fast. Commander Neil Harrington strode across the deck, his expression carved in stone. He climbed the small ladder to Hawk's cockpit. "Mercer," he said, voice low but firm. "We need altitude. Now. Whatever's coming in, you get above it before it knows you're there." "Yes, sir." "You know the drill. Straight up, show them what this machine was built for." Hawk nodded. Inside the cramped cockpit, he brought the Bearcat to life. The double wasp engine exploded with a deep, throaty roar that vibrated through the deck. Prop wash blasted aft as the wings trembled with pent-up energy. "Blue 109, cleared for launch. Make this fast, Mercer." The catapult crew signaled. Hawk's heartbeat merged with the engine's rumble. Then, phoom! The Bearcat shot forward, the Pacific wind slamming into the canopy. The wheels barely touched the deck before wrenching free, lifting the aircraft into open sky. At 220 feet, Hawk shoved the throttle to the wall. The Bearcat answered like a beast unleashed. The climb angle sharpened, 20 degree, 30 degree, 40 degree, until it was pointing nearly straight up. The altimeter spun like a clock gone mad. 1,000 feet, 3,500 feet, 6,000 feet, 9,200 feet. In under 2 minutes, he blasted through 10,000 feet, the carrier shrinking into a gray speck beneath the morning haze. Sweat clung to his gloves. The engine screamed at full war power, but it wasn't strain, it was hunger. This was why the Bearcat existed. And then Hawk saw them. 3 dark shapes slicing across the horizon at high speed, skimming the ocean before pulling up in a wide climbing arc. Even at this range, he recognized the silhouettes instantly. Not Zeros, not Oscars. These were Ki-84 Franks. the best Japan ever built. And they were flying like they were hunting something. Hawk's breath slowed. His pulse steadied. He rolled the Bearcat inverted, nose dropping toward the rising fighters below. Already, he was above them, and they had no idea. Up here, he was the ghost every Japanese pilot feared in the final days of the war. The enemy that always appeared above you. The shadow that owned the vertical, the nightmare rising straight out of the sun. Hawk pushed into his attack dive. The hunt had begun. The Bearcat dropped from the heavens like a spear, sunlight flashing off its clipped wings as Hawk eased the stick forward. The altitude unwound rapidly, 9,500 F, 8,200, 7,000. While the Ki-84s continued their slow rising turn beneath him, unaware that death was descending in a near vertical line. Wind buffeted the canopy with a deep howl, the kind a pilot feels in his bones. Hawk tightened his harness and kept his breathing steady. The Bearcat accelerated frighteningly fast in a dive, so fast that pilots were taught not to look too long at the airspeed indicator in moments like this. The sight could rattle even veterans. Below, the Japanese formation was beginning to change. Their leader, a pilot with sharp discipline, judging from his precise turn radius, leveled his wings momentarily before banking left again. He was scanning, searching, sensing danger. Experience guided his instincts. Men like him had survived hundreds of sorties, seen countless ambushes. But not this. Not a foe that fell upon you from impossible angles. Hawk knew he had only seconds before detection. He curled 2 fingers around the trigger switch. Steady, steady. At 3,000 feet separation, the lead Frank suddenly jerked its nose upward. Its pilot had seen the glint, just a fragment of reflected light, but enough to spark reflex. He broke hard left, dragging his wingman with him. But Hawk was already committed. He rolled the Bearcat slightly right, adjusting for their evasive sweep, and unleashed a 2-second burst. The 4 20mm cannon roared. A deep, chest-punching thunder that filled the cockpit. Brilliant tracers carved through the morning sky. 2 molten streaks smashed into the second Frank's right wing. The aircraft shuddered violently, then snapped into a lethal spiral, trailing a white ribbon of vapor as the pilot fought to stabilize. Flames licked from the ruptured wing root. The aircraft plunged toward the sea. The remaining 2 Ki-84s split, one climbing into a desperate corkscrew ascent, the other diving hard toward cloud cover at 5,000 feet. Hawk pulled nearly 5 Gs as he broke upward again, climbing into the vertical like the Bearcat was magnetized to the sky itself. No Hellcat, no Corsair, no Wildcat he had ever flown climbed like this. With the engine screaming at 2,800 RPM and manifold pressure in the red, the aircraft surged upward at an angle no Japanese pilot could hope to match. Below him, the climbing Frank was struggling, its nose oscillating, its angle too steep for comfort. The Ki-84 was a superb machine, but it was built for maneuver fights, not pure vertical ascents. The instant it tried to follow the Bearcat into a straight-up climb, it bled energy like a severed artery. Hawk watched it slowing, the nose wavering, the prop wash weakening. The aircraft hanging limply for an instant as if suspended by invisible strings. A perfect stall trap. Hawk pushed the stick left, arced over the top of his climb, and came down behind the Frank in a descending corkscrew. His lips tightened. He centered the gun sight. The Japanese pilot saw him in that moment. Even through 2 canopies and 700 feet of air, Hawk could almost feel the shock in the man's movements. An instinctive jolt, a panicked rudder kick, the unmistakable realization. He shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be above me. How did he? Hawk squeezed the trigger. The cannon spat fire. Shells tore through the Frank's fuselage, One round struck the engine block, exploding in a flash of debris. The cockpit canopy flashed bright orange as flames engulfed the forward section. The fighter yawed left, trailing black smoke, and plunged earthward in a fatal tumble. Hawk didn't celebrate. He didn't even breathe. He simply scanned his instruments and throttled up again, climbing back into the vertical for one simple reason. The last Frank, the one diving into the clouds, was now accelerating, trying to escape. Hawk keyed his radio. Blue 109 to Langley. 2 bandits down, one attempting to disengage south-southeast. Static crackled. Copy, Blue 109. Do not let him reach low cloud cover. Take him before he gets lost in it. That was easier said than done. Cloud banks were rising, thickening, swirling into a layered shield. A skilled Japanese pilot could slip into that murk and vanish. Hawk angled into the pursuit, pushing the Bearcat to 380 knots. The fight was no longer a clash of tactics. This was pure speed, pure altitude, pure vertical dominance. And the Bearcat, built for this very moment, was about to prove why Japanese pilots once spat on its concept and then learned to fear its shadow. Hawk pushed the throttle to full combat power. The Bearcat surged like a living thing, the engine's deep growl turning into a sharpened metallic scream as the aircraft knifed through the air. The Ki-84 ahead of him was already disappearing, its silhouette shrinking, dissolving into the gray wall of clouds, forming over the southern quadrant of the Philippine Sea. At this angle, at this speed, Hawk knew the truth every Japanese pilot had once relied upon. Clouds could be salvation. Cover meant life. Confusion could break pursuit. But the Bearcat, the machine built to take away every refuge the enemy relied upon, would not let the Frank vanish so easily. At 4,200 feet, the first wisps of vapor whipped across Hawk's canopy. Moisture rattled against metal. Visibility collapsed from clear horizon to swirling white in seconds. He eased back on the throttle. Too much speed here meant death. One wrong correction and he'd lose the Frank, or worse, plow straight into the water. Inside the cockpit, dim, suffocating fog wrapped him in isolation. The horizon vanished. The world became an abstract smear of swirling cream gray. Only instruments remained: artificial horizon, altimeter, vertical speed indicator, cold, unwavering truth in a place where the human eye was useless. Hawk's breathing slowed again. Steady, controlled. Trust the panel. Ignore the senses. The Bearcat will hold. Radios hummed faintly. Blue 109, Langley. Status? He kept his eyes locked on the attitude indicator. Still in pursuit, entering cloud layer. Frank bearing 155, altitude dropping slowly. He's trying to lose me. Be advised, Mercer. Don't let him sucker you into a low-visibility turn fight. Stay patient. Understood. Ahead, a dark blur flickered under the cloud base. Just a moment, just a shadow, but unmistakable. The Ki-84. Hawk nudged the stick forward and followed. Breaking out of the cloud bottom at 3,100 feet, the world exploded back into view. Blue sea, pale horizon, and the Frank streaking low across the waves, forcing spray to whip in its wake. It was a desperate tactic. No Ki-84 pilot chose to skim the surface unless he had no other option. The slightest miscalculation meant instant death. But it also meant a tight chase. Your stomach in your throat, your altimeter unforgiving, your engine threatening to swallow itself if mishandled. Hawk lowered his nose and dived. The Frank's pilots saw him then, truly saw him. The enemy fighter banked left in a brutal skid across the water, propeller tips biting sea mist. Hawk matched the move perfectly, rolling with the inertia, the Bearcat's great engine snarling in defiance. Both fighters tore across the surface at nearly 390 knots, their shadows racing them like twin predators. Inside the Japanese cockpit, the Frank pilot, a veteran named Lieutenant Saito, knew something was wrong. He had flown since 1943, survived Rabaul, Leyte, Formosa. He knew every American fighter intimately. He could outclimb Wildcats, outturn Hellcats, dance with Corsairs. But this thing behind him climbed like a rocket and dove like a meteor. He pushed throttle, adjusting mixture, hoping for just one more burst of acceleration. Hawk closed the gap by another 100 yards. Saito's hands shook on the control stick. He made a sharp right brake. Too sharp. The Frank wavered, its prop biting the air in uneven pulses. Hawk instinctively understood. Saito was pulling more Gs than his aircraft could sustain at this altitude. Hawk gained another 50 yards. The Japanese pilot tried a vertical jink. It failed instantly. The Ki-84 surged upward, stalled at its apex, then sagged downward like a marionette with its strings cut. It was over. Hawk lined up behind the settling silhouette. Range, 300 yards. Altitude, 2,700 feet. Closure, fast. Too fast. He forced himself not to fire yet. Too much closure meant overshoot. One burst too early, and the Frank could slip beneath him, drag him into a turn, force a reset. Hawk steadied his breathing, held the crosshairs. He waited. Waited. 1 second. 2. 3. Now. Hawk squeezed the trigger. The Bearcat unleashed another thunderous burst. 4 streams of fire converged. Shells tore through the Ki-84's tail assembly. Shrapnel sprayed like sparks from a grinding wheel. The Frank's rudder sheared clean off in a single, brutal flash. Saito's aircraft whipped left uncontrollably. It rolled. It bucked. It spiraled downward, slicing through sunlight and shadow until it hit the water in a violent geyser of white spray. Silence followed. Hawk eased his throttle, letting the Bearcat level out. His arms trembled. From adrenaline, from relief, maybe from the weight of knowing another human being had just died by his hand. He keyed the radio, voice barely steady. Langley. Last bandit destroyed. Area clear. But the fight was not done. Not for Hawk's conscience. Not for the legend of the Bearcat. And not for what awaited him when new, faster, more mysterious targets appeared on radar in the weeks to come. The ones no one yet dared talk about. Hawk climbed gently back toward 5,000 feet, letting the Bearcat settle into a steady cruise. The sky, moments ago a battleground of screaming metal and rising vapor trails, had returned to an eerie calm. The clouds that once sheltered fleeing enemies now drifted harmlessly, glowing silver under the late morning sun. Only the faint smell of cordite in Hawk's cockpit reminded him that the fight had been real and close. He rubbed a trembling hand across his brow, smearing sweat across his flight helmet. The adrenaline that had carried him through the ambush evaporated, replaced with a quiet, crushing fatigue. The Bearcat hummed, gentle now, as if aware the moment for savagery had passed. Blue 109 Langley. Confirm area secure? The voice crackled through his headphones, mixed with the static of distant sea storms. Hawk took a breath. Confirmed. 3 enemy fighters splashed. No further contacts. A pause. Then, copy, Hawk. Bring her home. Home. A flight deck floating on an endless ocean. A steel island filled with men who trusted him to stand between danger and their survival. He banked gently northward, the carrier soon emerging from the haze, slim, gray, and vulnerable against the vastness of the sea. As he approached, the deck crew below snapped into action. White jerseys hustled to clear tie-downs. Yellow shirt directors stepped into position. Red shirt ordnance crewmen paused their tasks to watch the returning ghost who'd risen straight into the sun and come back with the sky still trailing behind him. The tailhook caught the arresting wire with a violent jolt. The Bearcat's wheels slammed the deck, bouncing once before gripping firmly. Hawk throttled back and let the engine wind down into a soft, rhythmic rumble. Deck crew swarmed the aircraft, securing cables and checking for structural stress. Hawk stepped down the ladder, boots hitting the deck with a hollow metallic thud. His legs nearly buckled. It took a moment before he found his balance. Commander Harrington approached, expression stoic, until the slightest nod of respect broke through the facade. "You did well," Harrington said quietly. Hawk stared at the horizon where the Frank pilots had vanished. They were veterans. They knew what they were doing. "And now you know what this aircraft can do," Harrington replied. "This is what we built the Bearcat for. Not dogfights, not turn games. Vertical dominance. Make the enemy look up and lose hope." Hawk didn't answer. He simply looked at his machine. Compact, muscular, almost modest in size. It didn't look like the fastest climbing piston fighter ever built. It didn't look like a nightmare. And yet, the evidence lay scattered beneath the waves. Later that night, while the ship drifted under a blanket of stars, Hawk sat alone on the port walkway, the warm wind brushing his face. He thought of Claire's letter. He thought of Lieutenant Saito's final moments. The weight of taking a life never grew light, no matter how justified the mission. But in those reflections, a truth formed. The Bearcat was not designed to win duels. It was designed to end them. Built in the final year of a war that demanded absolute superiority, the F8F climbed like a rocket because its designers wanted to ensure American pilots always began the fight from the one place no enemy could contest: the vertical throne. In exercises over Okinawa, Japan, and later Korea, this truth only deepened. Pilots who first mocked its small frame soon discovered it out-accelerated everything in the sky. In post-war interception drills, the Bearcat appeared seemingly from nowhere. One moment invisible, the next descending in a perfect firing solution, its pilot calm and stone-focused. Enemy trainees began calling it a ghost. American pilots began calling it a dream. And the few Japanese veterans who faced it quietly called it a vertical nightmare. On the carrier deck far below, mechanics tended to Blue 109, wiping soot from gun ports, checking stress lines along the wings, refueling its belly tank. They handled it carefully, reverently, like a weapon that had proven its prophecy. Hawk looked up at the moonlit sky. In those stars, the legend of the Bearcat was already taking shape. A fighter born too late for the war that created it, yet perfect for the enemies bold enough to challenge it afterward. A machine that climbed into the heavens faster than fear itself, and dove with the weight of judgment. A ghost that always appeared above you. And somewhere deep in the quiet sea below, 3 fallen fighters lay in dark silence, witnesses to the truth the world would soon learn. Mock the Bearcat, and it will answer from above. If you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe.